Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2021 Leaders in Trade Compliance series. Today we have Jeff Sammon with us. Jeff, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Again, every time I have someone on, I always tell them how I appreciate them coming on. It's your time, it's my time, and most of us, we're not doing it during our work time. So it's
Yeah.
always appreciable for you to be here, to give your time and this knowledge and these tips that you'll give to the community. So I really appreciate that. So Jeff, today we have Jeff with us. He's the director of Global Trade Services at TE Connectivity. Before this, he was the director with the Microsoft as well. And before that, I know Jeff, you've done a couple of things. You've even been a teacher as well. So we want to learn all about you, what you do, what you've done in the past, a couple of tips for the people who want to grow within this trade compliance profession. It would be great to have some positive knowledge and someone to look up to. So thank you so much for being here. Why don't you start by telling us about what you do right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. This is going to be a fun conversation. I will preface that I have a dog right behind me, and there's a window, and there are squirrels. So hopefully he doesn't bark during this, and if he does, we'll deal with it. I'm Jeff Sammon. I've been doing trade compliance activities in some way, shape, or form for 15 plus years. I stopped counting after 15 because I still think of myself as a very young individual. That's my statement. So what I'm doing right now at TE Connectivity is as the director of the program management office for Global Trade Services. So we call ourselves GTS, not to be confused with SAP GTS, not at all. We are the PMO, or program management office, has four main pillars. The first is policy and procedures. So it's one standard way to do things across the globe within reason, right? There's one way to do an HS classification standard. Now there's country specific rules and that you have to take into account, but there's one global process that we're going to work towards for all things within trade. That's policy and procedures. The next is automation. So I have a team member that is focused on automating all of our processes where possible. We have metrics, controls, and assessments, which I like to call MCA. Think of the Beastie Boys. It's a cool little nickname. So monitor, controls, and assessments is in charge of exactly what it sounds like: monitoring the processes, making sure it works, putting in place controls, much like the Sarbanes-Oxley methodology. How do you know you're following the processes? How do you know you're not accidentally violating some type of regulation? You have controls that are put in place. And then assessments internally. So what are the things that we need to monitor and assess as we go through? So think of it as mini internal audits. The fourth and final one is kind of the catch-all bucket. This person is the trade. I think the official title is Trade Data and Business Manager. So they do all the budget, all the budget for the organization, as well as trade data, upstream data from our business partners, whether that's HR, engineering, supply chain, that provides data into a trade compliance system. This person reaches out to those main functions. It's the one tickle point, if you will, or focal within trade, that those functions can come in and say, how do I fix this issue? Who should I go to? Or we go back up to HR of saying, just putting in Jeff is not a good way to enter in the name into our tool, because we do restricted party screening of our employees. Mm-hmm. We need a little bit more information. So it's a give and take. So in a nutshell, what I do at TE is none of the fun stuff. None of the fun stuff of trade compliance. I don't get to do any of the licensing, the strategy, the negotiating, tariff engineering, or designing for exportability. None of that. I just put in place structure and rigor and automation to make sure my team members, my teammates that do that do the fun stuff, have the infrastructure behind them to be able to go execute. So that's what I do.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I'm just curious. So how do you manage to keep track of everything and everyone at that level, being the director. And I'm sure a lot of people are wondering as well, not just T connectivity, anywhere you've been in the past as well. How do you, what does it take to succeed in the position where you are as a person who is kind of over managing all of this going on, either it's in a country or in a region or in globally, sometimes the whole world.
Yeah. So the first thing is a heavy dose of daily crying. No, so I do joke around quite a bit because what I do, what we do in trade compliance is not fun. It's not always enjoyable. So I have to have some sense of humor about all of this. I jokingly tell people, hey, nobody's going to remember Jeff Sammon for being the most excellent paper pusher and trade regulator in a company. I'm not inventing the @ sign in emails. Right. I'm not doing anything like that. But I do behind the scenes think of myself as protecting national security for wherever our products are. So that side tag of my sense of humor. How you maintain a list of everything going on. Ooh, that's a tough question in the sense of there's no good system that I can keep a list. I have a glass right here at my desk. It's a glass tabletop. So I write with an erasable marker on it all day long. I have sticky notes that have things. I take meeting minutes and notes in my notebook. I use Microsoft OneNote. I use Microsoft To Do to track all my lists. The biggest secret is being organized for yourself. Don't try to adopt my way of organization because you'll look at it and go, oh, this guy's crazy, which probably, but you have a sense of organization that you need to follow. There are some simple tools like a risk register to make sure we're tracking and monitoring the things that we know are risky. So I borrow from internally the enterprise risk management systems. So I make sure I'm tuned into them. Whatever system they use, I try to replicate inside the company. Long ago, I gave up trying to have an empty email inbox. Long ago, I gave that up. Partially because as soon as you join any multinational corporation, you go to bed. Next morning, you wake up and there's 60, 70, 80, 100 emails from all those, maybe more, however many more, from all those people who were working while you're sleeping. The sun never sets on business. So it's a little bit of keeping track of your own lists. And then the other thing within my team, I have weekly one-on-ones where it's 30 to 45 minutes. It's on the calendar for an hour so that we protect it. And that sounds like a lot of work, having a weekly touch point with every person on my team, as well as my peers. I try to touch base with them at least every other week. But that one-to-one interaction, it serves a couple purposes. It's guaranteed time on the calendar to talk and understand what's going on. It's a way to highlight issues. It's also a way to focus on the employees or your team member's career. Or I know I've got a meeting every 2 weeks with my colleague in China. Guaranteed, if I don't see him, I'm at least touching base with him. So I may have a cheat sheet over here of things I need to talk to him about that I may not want to schedule a special meeting for because it's not worth 30 minutes. It's just a quick touch base. So totally didn't answer your question, kind of to be honest, but it's a system of just being organized. You got to be organized for yourself.
Yeah, and just to add my 2 cents, I totally agree with you. I feel like the main thing here is what I got out of all of that, and what I've learned from my own experience is that you need to write things down. Honestly, whether it's whatever thing you use, whether it's real paper, whether it's online, you have to write things down. You can't just be like, oh, I'll remember this in 1 hour, so I'll do it. And that's just that's not a method that's just you're using right now. I mean, I used to use this even back in when I used to go to school
Oh
at
yeah.
that time, because as humans we tend to think that we will remember stuff, but when one stuff gets piled on to another stuff, then onto a third stuff, you tend to forget stuff,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right? And if you keep on doing that, you'll never accomplish anything, and you won't even remember what you were supposed to do. So the main thing is you need to write stuff down anywhere you can find. Write it down so that way you can go back and track. Even if something is going to fall off or later on you won't have to do it, you can at least cross that off. You can at least have that in the view that, oh, at least it's there. I know I don't need it anymore, so it's done.
Right. I will say I've bounced back and forth between um, little, I forgot what the brand of the notebook is, but little notebooks like this
Mm.
to using OneNote.
Mhm.
So if I have a standing meeting once a week or it's a recurring meeting, I tie my meetings to OneNote in Outlook.
Mhm.
And then I force myself to take notes. So I may be writing the notes down in my notebook, but afterwards I go and I transcribe, not word for word, because sometimes I write down the stupidest things, the silliest things, like person in upper left had a good idea about balancing whatever. Like I don't need to know where they were in the screen, but I was writing it because that's what was coming out of my head.
Mhm.
But I go back and I transcribe it, so then it's in my notebook, but then it's also out in a OneNote for my team members to see, and that's
Mhm.
actually pretty powerful because it's searchable.
Mhm.
It's writing things down. There is evidence in when I was teaching. There was the thing we would always tell students or I would always tell students is write it down. Don't type notes.
Mhm.
Don't try to type notes, because the physical action of you having to think how to translate that word into cursive or into words forces you to remember it.
Mhm.
Uh, Annoys my wife to no end. I can tell her I know an answer. I know how to get to it. I know where it is, and I'll go digging through my notebooks and I'll find it, and she'll just shake her head at me like I don't know
Mhm.
how you remember.
I agree with you. I used to write a lot too, but nowadays what I do is like if I have a meeting, I use OneNote. And
Mm,
what I love about OneNote is you can search, you can have it on your phone. If you're
yeah. Oh,
traveling and you need some information, it's so
oh,
easy to just do a search and find the information you're looking for, whether it's just a contact or whether
yeah,
it's just something else that you need to for some reason use.
yeah.
It's right there on your fingertips, and I love that.
And the marking within OneNote, you can go up into the upper ribbon and mark it with an action item, and
Hmm.
then you can search all your action items across all your notebooks.
Yeah.
Oh, that level, like in a lot of my program management and project management stuff, that just makes me giddy. I just get excited about seeing all the things that okay, so then it's because then it's an action item, and then you can follow up
Hmm.
on it, and then you start
Yeah.
holding people accountable for answering the question.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
as soon as you put that type of system in place, amazing how quickly things start changing.
I agree with you, and again, writing down. You have to write stuff down, otherwise you will forget. I cannot stress that enough to anyone who's watching.
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah. Right.
definitely.
Even I had a really good person right when I was starting off my career in trade compliance. I was talking to somebody, and I did a jurisdiction classification. It wasn't something that cool sounding back then, but I did a classification of a product that was clearly an EAR product, and it was clearly an aircraft part,
Hmm.
9991, super simple. And I said, oh no, here's your answer, 98991. And the person will remain nameless. They came and they scolded me, and I was a little upset at the time of like, why did you scold me? I can't believe this. It goes on a plane. There's no other use for it. It's clearly this ECCN. And her comment to me was, yeah, but the regulations may change, and so take a snapshot, understand what that is. She was foundationally trying to teach me why to do it. Just like write down why you made this decision. So in 10 years or 5 years, when Office of Export Enforcement is asking you, or worse, somebody else, why this decision was made, there's your rationale. It's documented. Even if it's the simplest thing, write it down. Even if it's a memo to file, snip out the ECCN language that's applicable and put it there, or retype it, say from whatever it is. And her comment, it just stuck to me of like, write the rationale down, memorialize it, and just got beaten into my brain that that's what you do. So when somebody else comes along, they're like, oh, right, now I know why we called it this, or now I know why we did this.
And that concept carries on to classification in general as well. When I get information to classify something, I always write down what they tell me. I have an audit trail. So for example, if tomorrow someone comes and tell me this part doesn't even go on a vehicle or something like that, I can go back to that audit trail. I can be like, this is something that came from this person, and this is exactly what they told me. Like, I can't know anything else except what the engineer told me, right? I mean, you have to have a backup for yourself.
Yep. And that's what the notes are all about. You're a compliance professional. It's a little bit of cover your rear, or CYA as it's known, but it's also just, listen, this thing is a rusty. It's rusty. It's not, and it's got holes in it. It's not a steel trap. So writing it down to remember why you did something, or why, oh yeah, I remember why we said that. It was this, and this.
Exactly. And I feel like that's the best tip anyone can ever give that to anyone. So thank you so much for all of that, especially all the details you went through. Yeah, I'm sure if someone watches this point is gonna stick with them forever.
Yeah.
So kind of connecting that to, and going back to how you talked about someone who taught you something when you began this career, I want to kind of talk about how you began this career at all. I mean, how did you end up here?
How did I end up here? So I usually tell people whiskey and poor choices. So poor life choices. No, in seriousness, how I ended up in trade compliance is quite entertaining. So I was a high school history teacher. I taught world history and U.S. history and U.S. government. So you had to come through me to get out to be an adult and graduate, an adult as close as you want to call it, to graduate high school. I loved teaching. It was really fun, and I had some time. And a professor in college talked me into going, or didn't talk me, I shouldn't say that. He said, "Have you ever thought about doing public policy?" And so I did a little bit of research on what public policy is, and I went back to get a master's in public policy with the intention of doing education policy. So working either at the state level or the federal level, or working for a nonprofit doing education policy in some way, shape, or form. The school I went to was Pepperdine University in Malibu. If you've ever been to Malibu, you know why I went there. There was other schools I could have gone to that I got into, but who can blame me for wanting to, a Midwesterner wanting to be across the street from the ocean? Yes. So went to Pepperdine, signed up, and started my path. It's a 2-year program. In the middle, you did an internship in the summer for 3 to 4 months, and their philosophy was to encourage you to do something outside of your policy area. So if I was doing education policy, they kind of frowned on if I went to work for the Department of Education. They wanted to make a well-rounded policy wonk, if you will. And so I got an internship with the British American Security Information Council. Sounds way cooler than it actually is. And this council did things to further the cooperation between, shockingly, the British and the Americans in the defense sector. So I went and got here I sit. I was there, and the first thing I had to do was teach the US DOD. I'm sorry, the UK DOD, the UK MOD about DFARS, FARS, the ITAR, and the EAR. things I've never heard of. What are all these weird things? Explain what it is, explain why the DoD, US DoD has these issues. And then I did the exact same thing. A coworker in England did the same thing for the US DoD about the acquisition regulations in the UK and the UK BIS agencies. And so I did this. It was fascinating. I hate to say this, but I read the ITAR and I'm like, ooh, this kind of makes sense. Don't know why I said that. And it was before it went through export control reforms. It was an easier ITAR. It was, if it goes on a plane or specially designed for a military application, it's ITAR. So super easy. So I did that, came back, and I was kind of fascinated with it. I was like, this is really fun. I kind of want to get into doing this for a living. I wonder what I could do. I had very short-sighted goals of like, maybe I could work for one of the agencies. I don't know. They don't seem to hire that often. So I shifted and I was just doing local policy, American politics and local policy. And I added international relations to my master's. And that's how I ended up doing this. And then I graduated, went out, I did 7 months. This is my one plug. I did a long-term ranger. So for 9 months, I worked at a Boy Scout camp. Best job ever, where I was a maintenance person for the camp, and then went off and got into the real world. And I went to work for a nonprofit, and with the intention of getting into government. And then, as all my friends from Pepperdine tell me, I sold out and I went to work for private industry. And I started my career off at Raytheon Aircraft Company, which was old Hawker Beechcraft. In Wichita, Kansas, and I got stuck on the T6 line. And it was originally they didn't have an opening, and I was applying for a position on their contracts team, thinking I can move into trade compliance in some way, shape, or form. Contracts, defense contracting is kind of close to exports. It's not exactly what I want, but it's kind of close. So in the interview with the vice president of contracts, he asked why the T6 was a military good. I was like, oh, well, funny thing, you asked that. So category H says this, and then there's a note, and it's a turboprop, and it says this, and it's got a note underneath turboprop, and it's got hard points. So you're kind of stuck. It's not just a civilian aircraft. Not to mention it also has all these other capabilities in it. It's like, yep, you're not going to be in contracts. You're not. And I thought I tanked the interview, and he takes me over to meet the director of exports or director of trade compliance. And I was offered a job. So that's how I kind of got into this. I kind of fell into it. And then it was just dog years of experience is what it felt like. So
I feel like with you, at least you kind of had an idea which direction you were going to go into, and you ended up in that direction. I feel like a lot of us people in trade compliance, we just ended up there because we were looking for a job.
Yeah, well, I know a lot of people who I jokingly say, so did you end up in trade compliance because you were in the restroom when they were asking for who wants to fill out the HS code, or how did you? I know a lot of people, if either they just wanted a job. I know a couple engineers who found HS, like they found the harmonized tariff schedule logical. And they loved it, and they just shifted from engineering into trade compliance. So they fell into it. It's not like it's very rare to find somebody who goes to school with the intention or with a life mission of, I want to be a trade compliance person.
I think you're the first one I met.
There's more. I think that, you're getting, I think with the Society for International Affairs, and I'm trying to think of, hang on, it'll come to me. ICPA, other large kind of compliance organizations. You're starting to see more people kind of purposefully get into this as a career at a young age, out of college. So
I agree. We have two questions, so let's just see the first one. So Chin Pazo, I think that's how you say it, asked, how do you apply Six Sigma methodology to trade compliance?
Well, depends on what side you want to apply it on. There's so you can apply it on your KPIs, you can apply it on your controls, or you can apply it on the front end on procedures. So, and I'm gonna say this with a little bit of snarkiness, just a touch. Trade compliance is not a dark art. It is something that is repeatable, right? The process in which you follow to get an HS classification, or the process you follow to do an export license, is repeatable. And if you're a one-person shop, if you're a small company, there's no real reason to have everything written down step by step. If you're a, I don't know, $1-2 trillion corporation that makes a lot of different things, then you want processes. If you're a defense contractor, you most certainly want processes so you can point out where things are. Mm-hmm. And that's where Six Sigma for me comes into play in trade compliance, is process mapping, documenting making the pretty picture with all the little process map boxes, circling where you think an escape may be, or circling where a control point needs to be. And then turning that written that process map into a narrative, a procedure, and then following it. And just a lot of other principles are continuous improvement. So you fix it and you continuously improve it. Mm-hmm. I always tell people that get very concerned around Six Sigma that I'm not here to get you into. I'm not here to convert you to be a black belt. I'm not here to convert you to Six Sigma. So I think of Six Sigma as a religion. And so I'm Catholic. I grew up Catholic, and I'm not wanting you to get into the trappings of Catholicism. When do we kneel? When do we sit? When do we eat meat? Can we eat meat on Fridays? When is Lent? I don't need you to have all of those trappings of Six Sigma. Or for the faith, I just need you to have faith. Mm-hmm. I just need you to know that, hey, there's this concept of process mapping, continuous improvement, and how do I fix it and keep moving forward. Don't get wrapped around the axle of using the 5 whys or the fishbone chart or the right tools. Just kind of look at it and figure out how you can use it in your setting for your compliance program. Other ways to do it is within the metrics. So you allow certain levels of escapes to occur. Every business allows a certain level of escape to occur. And I had a coworker or boss a couple companies ago that said the amount of rat hair that is allowed into a jar of peanut butter by the FDA. So there's a certain amount that the U.S. Food and Drug Administration allows for rat hair to be in a peanut butter jar, and it's prescribed. So that's a failure, right? Personally, I think 1 hair too many, but they have per thousands of jars. They have an allotment, and that's Six Sigma. So how many hiccups are you going to allow? What's your RWA rate? What's your HS classification failure rate? I know we're in compliance, so we like to think there's a zero tolerance, but we're human, so you have to have some level you have to have some level of knowledge that there's going to be breaks. So what's your level? And just document it, and then monitor it, and then control for it.
Definitely, and even when you automate something can go wrong.
Oh yeah,
nothing is always 100%. And we have another question by the same person. What are the benefits of doing your tariff classification in-house as opposed to farming it out?
Farming it out. So not the licensed customs broker on this call. That's how I'm going to start. I think it depends on the level of expertise you have. It depends on the level of knowledge around how to do HS classifications. It is not a science. It is a science. It is a skill. It is something you need to just look at and say, it's a, 1112 34 6192. that's a live animal, something, I think. You don't just want to randomly throw darts. So you have to have the knowledge, you have to have the skills, you have to have the time to be able to do it. So if you have that in-house, the question is that time better served doing something else than an in-house person can do? If you don't have that skill set in-house, then you have to understand that you're going to, as you said, farm it out, and you're going to be kind of beholden to that service until you build up that skill set in-house. At the end of the day, if a classification is wrong, you can't blame the person that gave it to you. You're the one that used it to bring the goods into the country or to get out of the country. So there's a level of responsibility that you have that you can't escape. It's kind of, the benefits are, I always try to equate anything I do to my own personal life. So what's the benefit of cleaning my own house versus paying somebody to come clean the house? I have the skills, I have the knowledge, but would I rather go do a marathon or train for a marathon rather than spending the hour to clean the house? Would I rather go out, but I'm also going to have a cost benefit analysis or cost benefit of that, because now I'm going to have to pay for that. So I may lose something there. There's no right answer is what you're getting out of me. It's really a choice for the business and for the company to make. But the first thing you need to do is assess whether or not you have the skill sets to do it. If you don't have the skill sets, then you're kind of, you have a desire, you have not a desire, you have a better standing point to say, I need to go seek an expert.
Yep, definitely. I totally agree with you on everything you said. I think it's at the end, it comes down to a business decision, right? I mean, what's beneficial for the business? If, for example, like you said, if someone doesn't have the skill set to do it in-house, then they probably have to take it to someone else. On the other hand, then they will probably need to analyze how much it's going to cost to have someone from the outside rather than hire someone in-house. So
Right.
it's kind of like at the end, you kind of have to analyze everything, see the cost benefit of everything, and come up with a decision.
And also I'll throw in the one last spin on that is it sort of depends on the nature of your business. If this is going to show my age a little bit, but if you're just making the donuts and that's all you're doing is making the donuts, and all you do is make donuts, and that's your one product, that's an incredibly easy HS code that you can pay somebody to do. But if you make donuts and lattes and donut holes and croissants, and I can't think of all the different types of pastries, and oh, by the way, you run a bookstore, now you have a wide variety that, okay, now it may make sense. So it really also look at your products.
Yeah, definitely. And same person has another question for us. Should engineers be assigning all HTS classifications engineers whom do not have their broker's license?
I love this question. This is a foundational, fundamental thing we're grappling with in my company today. Is what level of involvement should engineering have versus trade compliance? And it's not 0 and 1. It's not, oh, that's all engineering or that's all trade compliance. It's as my current boss does this a lot to me. She's like, it's this, Jeff. It's this. It's joining together. So engineers know the product. They have it up in their head, the makeup of the product, what it's used for, where it fits. They can tell you if it's a 9-pin, 10-pin connector, even though it's got a chassis for 10 pins, but only 9 of them have a connector on the other end. So really that extra hole is just there. There's nothing that can go in there. That's all stuff that the engineer is going to know around it. Your broker, your licensed broker, has suffered long and hard to get that license, to get that broker's license. And they know how to go about doing the classifications. They know the order of review. They know how to take into account the chapter notes, and they know how to do all of the science of classification. So the two need to be together on it. The two need to work together on it. I think it's a combination. It's a team effort. Trade compliance is a team effort, and classification most certainly is the starting of that team.
Mm-hmm. And just to add to that, someone who has the trade compliance knowledge, they probably know, like you mentioned, they probably know those chapter and section notes, which are going to help them kind of define how CBP wants
Right.
the classification. So, for example, sometimes engineers, they think plastic is one thing, but then when you go to chapter 40, that's rubber, that's not plastic, or they think it's rubber, and
Right.
they keep on telling you it's rubber. What else do you want to know? It's rubber, it's rubber. But then when they tell you the actual material, it turns out to be silicone. So you're like, that's plastic. I mean,
Plastic, yeah. Yeah.
it doesn't work with CBP. Sorry, I can't argue with that. Then you have to like take a snippet of that chapter note and
And
send it to them and tell them this is why.
right. And it's, the I whenever I do jurisdiction classification training for engineers or HS classification for engineers, I sit down and tell them, I have a science degree. I want to level set. We're all equals in this room because I too have a science degree in politics. So that usually kind of gets a bunch of like, oh, great. And my comeback is, the product, I know the policy, I know the regulations, I know all of this. So the regulations say something like operational at 2 Kelvin. I don't know negative 2 Kelvin from 2 Kelvin. Now, immediately all the engineers in the room start perking up of like, wait a minute, this guy's an idiot, because negative 2 Kelvin isn't real. The zero is the coldest. 0 Kelvin is the coldest it can ever get. So that's the connection of, I don't know the science, you do. You know the math, you know the science, you know the product, you know the engineering half of it. I know the policy and the regulatory reasons. I know how to navigate those two things. So let's navigate together. Let me be your spirit guide through the regulations, and you can be my spirit guide through our products.
It's teamwork at the end.
Yeah.
And they're just asking, is the rubber vulcanized?
only trade compliance professionals get that joke.
Yeah, exactly. The next thing I kind of Jeff wanted to talk to you about is kind of could you give some I guess some of the big skills that you feel like people should have within trade compliance to grow in the current market and in the future, I guess.
Yeah. Well, the first thing, the first skill is it's kind of a double-sided coin skill. It's never be complacent and always learn. So never be complacent in the program that you're in. Trade compliance programs are only going good trade compliance programs only go one way, and that's up. They always evolve up. If you think you're plateauing, you're actually going kind of back down that hill, because your business is always growing. Your company is always growing. So you need to keep pace with it. So don't get complacent in anything you're doing, and always just have this desire to learn whatever it is. I tell when I was at Raytheon the second time, I would meet with the leadership development trade compliance professionals who don't out of college. They're in this special leadership development program, and I would tell them, don't be like Jeff. Don't come to the skills of program management late. Don't come to the knowledge or the usefulness of Six Sigma late. And if you're early in your career, man, let me tell you, now is the time to just learn and use and grow and learn things now, especially if you're early, as opposed to waiting and saying, oh, I'll get that later. And I always use myself as an example. I had a chance to sit for the customs broker's license, go through that. The company, I wasn't real busy. I was newly married. We lived in an apartment. I didn't have a social life, partially because we didn't have disposable income. So I was working a lot. I could have taken that time, 2 hours, an hour a day, and gotten the company to pay for my customs broker's license. Now, if I try to find that time, I'm kind of advanced in age. I have a social life. We have disposable income. I found hobbies to spend that money on, things that aren't work related. So do a lot of early. It's kind of like investing for your retirement. Invest in your career early, and it'll pay off. It'll pay off later. I think things that don't how to be successful in the future. It's the sooner you come to the idea that trade compliance is part of the business, and your job is to get the company to yes. Your job is to see how to grow the company in a compliant fashion. So, if somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, I got a really good idea. I want to sell the F-35 to China." Well, that's just not going to work. You can say no. But if they come to you and say, "I've got a really good idea. I'd like to market this thing that we only do for the U.S. military," I think there's some applications for that for the UK military. Sit down, work with them, figure out how to get them. Don't just be a no person. Understand program management, understand the other facets of the business. Those will all help you in your trade compliance career. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's a good answer for you, but that's.
I think it's a great answer. You have to always want to learn, and you have to always be willing to help, when you can, and serve as a guide. It's for yourself and for others as well. So I think that's a great answer, honestly, and I think a lot of people would appreciate it. And talking about the future, where do you think trade compliance will go? Whether we're talking about importation or exportation, where do you think it will go in the future? I know the past 4-5 years they've been crazy. Do you think it's going to keep on being that crazy?
Boy, I don't know. I hope not. I was telling somebody the other day that I yearn for the good old days, and they said, "What's the good old days?" And I said, "Oh, well before Al Gore invented the internet." They said, "Oh, no, it's just as bad then. There was the business happened. It's just you didn't have insight as much." I think, from a policy standpoint, it's going to be super interesting to see how the U.S. and China interact with each other as nations, as nations in the globe. That relationship will set the tone for our jobs for the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. If you see, clearly, I don't think either side, I don't think either side is wanting to go to a hot war, a military conflict, but they most certainly are flexing each other. They're flexing their muscles, and they're saying, I'm the star quarterback on the globe, and you have another person coming along saying, "No, I am." So, to use a really bad sports analogy, I think that international relationship between those two companies is gonna impact us greatly. I think automation is gonna take more and more. I'll say more and more expertise from us and put it into automation. There's good things and there's bad things about automation. When I was doing automation, a lot of heavy automation at a former company, I kind of lamented that I was automating the way I learned how to do trade compliance. And my boss at the time said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, the best way I can give you is this: how many carpenters can you go find to go build a house from scratch?" There's not that many in the US left that know that are old school traditional carpenters that can build a house from scratch, because now we have prefabbed walls. Now we have prefabbed roof mechanisms. So that's not, it's not bad that skill set's gone because the price of housing has gone down. I mean, not lately with the real estate market, but the price of housing has gone down, and the speed at which a house gets built has gone down, and the safety of those houses has gone up. So you're going to see, I think you're going to see more a push for more automation, a push for companies now understanding that, tariffs are a real thing. It's not just I can bury it in my tax department and worry about transfer pricing will take care of that. It's also engineering your products for the tariff. You're going to see companies starting to put more value in trade compliance professions because they need to navigate this international relationship between two countries, but they also need to avoid huge fines and penalties.
At the end, I think that's what it comes down to. Companies want to avoid the penalties.
Yeah.
The thing with trade compliance is there's, except free trade agreement savings and avoiding duties, there's not much monetary value unless we're trying to avoid penalties. So it's hard for sometimes the trade compliance departments to justify, for example, more people.
Yeah.
It's always tough to do that.
I mean, but if you own a home, do you have homeowners insurance? If you own a car, do you have car insurance? Partially, you have car insurance because the state requires you to have car insurance if you're in the United States. But
not all states.
Not all states. That's true. Not all states. But if you have a Maserati, are you driving around with the lowest level of car insurance?
Yeah.
No.
You have to be willing to take that risk.
It's risk management. And that's where Six Sigma, I mean, tying this way back, reaching far, that's where Six Sigma kind of helps, is to say, hey, I've got these metrics. I want to show my value to the business. I want to show how we are monitoring and controlling so that even if we do have a violation or a misstep or a potential hiccup, I at least have processes, procedures, and monitors and controls that I can go back and change and say, oops, I fixed it, and I fixed the root cause. But you have to be able to sell that story, and it's a little bit of a story to sell to your leadership. But I don't have a clue as to where trade compliance is going to go in the future. I'm just along for the ride. I think, like everybody else, I have my suspicions along with everybody else. I have my hopes. I always remember a engineer that came into my office 15 years or about 12 years ago, dropped down on the desk the Wall Street Journal that said President Bush was starting the export control reform, and he was kicking off the Export Control Reform Act and how, or not the act, but the export control reform process, and how they're going to delist a bunch of things out of the ITAR, and it's going to make life easier, and companies will be better off. And this engineer drops this newspaper on my desk and goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry you made this as a career choice. You're going to be out of a job in like 3 years, according to this. It's going to be so much simpler." I just giggled internally because any regulation, any regulatory update is never simple. Like okay,
sure, if you say so.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah, right. Electrical engineering. Okay, good job. Yeah.
Yeah, agree. There's a very, very specific question. You probably won't be able to answer it. Maybe I might be. Is something considered an export if it travels by land from Washington State through Canada to Alaska, but does not enter the commerce of Canada as inbound while in Canada?
Is something considered an export if it travels by land from Washington through Canada to Alaska, but does not enter the commerce of Canada as inbound while in Canada? You're gonna love my answer. It depends. It's definitely, it could be considered a temporary export out of the United States to Canada while it's transiting into Alaska. I've had aircraft that have had to stop to fuel, military aircraft that have had to stop to fuel in in Canada. And that's a temporary export to Canada. So we had to have the right licensing in place. That is such a find me on LinkedIn. Let's have a conversation because I want to know if this is a true case. Because it kind of depends on your product. It depends on is it under the jurisdiction of the EAR, the ITAR? Did it start its life off in a free trade zone in Washington before it went up? Was it ever in the commerce of the United States? There's so many questions. This is a good one.
Well, Chin, you know where to find him.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask you one last question before we run out of time. Could you give I guess a general advice to people who are in this field and who wanna kind of progress through this career? Just some good words to them before you go.
Good words. I think before we came live, I was chatting with Nadeem about this of how small the trade compliance community actually is. Yes, there are hundreds of thousands of brokers out there, but how many of them are active, and how many do exports, and how many do imports? And the community itself is relatively small. It's not incredibly tiny. It's not like it's just the two of us. There's hundreds of us, thousands of us. So I would say the first thing to do would be to network. The more you network, the better chance you have to find a new job, find growth opportunities, learn something new. I'm super excited if the questioner reaches out to me on LinkedIn because I'll learn something for certain because it'll cause me to go read the regulations. So networking is one of the most powerful things you can do. The other thing is anytime you feel as though I'll say it this way, anytime you feel as though you're in a dark spot and you're like, oh, trade compliance is eating my soul. It's eating me. Welcome to the brotherhood and sisterhood of trade compliance. Like we all have those days. Just know you're not in this alone, and that's where you fall back on that network to reach out to ask questions. I routinely call people in my network to ask questions of, am I crazy? I think this, and this is here's the fact patterns. And here's what I'm doing. Am I wrong? Am I crazy? No, you're not wrong. Everyone around you is wrong. Like, oh, good. Or yes, Jeff, the regulations changed 18 months ago. So now DDTC is considered a participating government agency. You can't just do a post-entry adjustment on if you forgot to put the exemption on it on something. It's not like the good old days with paper. They evolved. That network helps you kind of balance yourself because there's no way you're going to remember everything in trade compliance. So network, don't feel bad that you're doing the fun stuff of trade compliance. You're doing the good things for your company, even if the salesperson who gets a huge bonus at the end of the year for that sale is yelling and screaming at you. You are keeping them employed by not allowing them to, sell that F-35 to China. It's a big bonus though. It's a big bonus. A positive attitude also helps. I'm not going to lie about that. Just knowing that tomorrow's a better day and there's always going to be work to do. So job security.
That's what matters, right?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the kind words. I honestly think this whole session is gonna help out people kind of navigate their life, their careers, as well as give them some very, very, very good points on how they can succeed within this field. So thank you so much for all the good points you gave and your time on here. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And if like Jeff said, if anyone wants to reach out to him on LinkedIn, go ahead. Networking is the key. If you want to ask him a question or ask me a question, just reach out and we'll be there for you.
And I'll say it this way. Please call and talk to me about trade compliance because my significant other, my spouse, she most certainly wants me to talk to other trade compliance people about trade compliance. He does not want to hear about trade compliance anymore from me. So I'm happy to talk about it. This was really fun. Thanks for inviting me on. This was a blast.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.